Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to the 2020 San Francisco CIO Executive Leadership Summit. I'm Hunter Muller, Lead Principal of HMG Strategy. My team and I are delighted to be here with you today. Excited. We feel we have truly a world-class agenda with peers across your industry, across the globe, really to tackle this whole discussion around reimagining the business and the future of work, what you need to know now. So again, thank you for joining us. And hey, we couldn't do what we do here at HMG Strategy without our support from our partners. A big thanks to our partners today, Commvault, Darktrace, and Nutanix. Truly appreciate your support and engagement over the year. So new to HMG is the HMG Marketplace. The HMG Marketplace truly is unique in our industry, unique to HMG, and hopefully unique to our tech leaders and certainly our partners, where tech leaders and partners meet and essentially learn more through the Marketplace and Reference Center, learn more as well as request a meeting. We have a short video I'd like to cue up here. Team, can you
Many tech leaders are struggling to find the right solution to their technical business problems. HMG Strategy has created the HMG Marketplace and Reference Center to connect tech leaders with subject matter experts from peer-vetted providers of critical services and hot new technologies.
The HMG Marketplace, think of it as a reference center, a library to find out more about our partner companies and then set up a meeting.
It's challenging for all of us that we can't be together at these events. You won't be meeting necessarily with a salesperson, you're going to be meeting with myself, our senior executive team.
This truly is a game changer. So again, excited to announce the Marketplace. This is an idea we've been working on for quite a few years and spun it up in the last 100 days. And it's open. It's open for you to engage. Go to the hmg.com, click on Marketplace on the homepage, and then you can browse the various partners that are in there, learn more about some of our great partners, as well as, again, as Nicole mentioned, request a meeting with a senior executive and a sales engineer and a sales executive. So please support the team and us. Truly appreciate your engagement there. So we have a little survey we're going to run here. Team, you want to post a survey and get a read on how have priorities changed in the past 100 days? And if we all can just dive into that survey right away, give us some meaningful data for the rest of the conference here. So again, thanks for zooming in today. Appreciate your support and engagement. The largest technology executive network independent network in North America, maybe arguably the world. And we're part of this whole journey, innovating and transforming in perhaps the most uncertain times that we've ever seen in our professional careers spanning over 3 decades for most of us. So first up, we have Ralph Loura as the Senior Vice President of IT and CIO of Lumentum. Hey, Ralph, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks, Hunter. It's great to be here.
Great to see you, my friend. Ralph, we've been collaborating a long time together. Can you just give us one little soundbite, kind of just totally off the cuff? What does HMG do differently for you and your team and your vision in the industry and your roadmap when we get together, both in person and digitally?
Well, I mean, if I had to sum it up in a word, it'd be candor, right? So you hear a lot of the other kind of sessions or other programs, and it's just sort of talking heads, talking about the same buzzwords and kind of blah, blah, blah. It's sort of like the teacher on the, on the Peanuts cartoons, right? You can't it's just gibberish. What's real about HMG is it's candor. It's candid conversations, people talking about what they're really doing and what's working and what's not working. And I've never attended in person an event or a virtual event where I didn't walk away with a notepad full of ideas or follow-ups or kind of interesting reframing of things to kind of take away.
Thanks, Ralph. Really appreciate your active engagement, endorsement, probably for going on a decade now. Really appreciate it. So I've been speaking with a lot of leaders, right, about how they're adapting to this changing environment we're in right now. You guys are truly a global company and one of the leaders in technology in the world, in your space. What are you doing differently today, and what have you learned over the past, say, 4 months?
It's interesting. When it all started, we actually were right in the middle of an ERP go-live of an acquisition integration of a company we'd acquired, right at the end of January. And the key integration site was Shenzhen, China. So we were right in the forefront, in the midst of this from day one. And at first it was like a lot of companies. It was about, hey, how do we get till tomorrow? How do we survive? What do we do? How do we adapt? How do we kind of flex to just keep operations going, keep people safe, and so on. So that was kind of focus for month one, so they call it February. And then pretty soon it was clear, hey, we also had to adapt supply chain. We had to get much more flexible, much more quickly. If a particular country became a problem, logistically I couldn't get things through. Some of our key contract manufacturers or logistics partners or customers had like strange new requirements. Hey, we're going to take all your material, we're going to leave it on the loading dock for 14 days before we bring it in the warehouse. And we're like, wait a minute, like you can't leave it in the sun. That's going to affect quality. So how do we adapt to that? So a lot more collaboration, a lot more communication. And what really came, I think what we've learned, the biggest thing we've learned from a lot of this is the way we go digital isn't by taking your sort of analog meetings and behaviors and things and then just turning it into a Zoom call, right? It's not you don't take your 30-minute meeting and make it a 30-minute Zoom call, or your once a week staff meeting and make it a once a week Zoom call. What we've done, for instance, is the entire executive leadership team since the 28th of January has a 6:30 a.m. Pacific time call every day to check in what's going on, what changed, what customer's working, what operational challenge do we have today, or hey, what's going on with our people and how do we motivate them, how do we reward them, how do we keep them safe and healthy, and so on. So we shifted from this sort of batch in-person, once a week, once a month kind of style to literally like 15-minute everyday touch points. And people are a lot more accessible because we're all kind of sitting in front of our desk at home most of the day. And so what used to take a week or two to get a decision done, right? Because you're chasing people around the world or they're in meetings somewhere. All of a sudden I get those decisions done in hours because I can easily grab people and have a quick conversation. So the pace of change in the business, the amount of flex, how quickly we're adapting, how quickly we're changing the way we work, what we do, and how we make decisions, has, in some ways, it's exciting. It's changed kind of the energy level in the business, and it's allowed us to bring forward a lot of new technology.
Exciting times, right? Ralph, for folks that don't know Lumentum, a little bit about Lumentum, what your space is and the global reach you have. Yeah,
so we're about $1.7 billion in revenue globally. We have 5 different business units. We sell into the telecom, transmission, data center, commercial lasers business, and then something called 3D sensing. So essentially we sell photonics. We do interesting things with light, and we make components and modules and chips that power things like the 3D sensor that's on your phone that unlocks it with your face, to some AR and VR technologies. We're increasingly present in LiDAR systems for autonomous driving and sensing the world around you. And of course, we continue to be at the heart of virtually every packet that transmits over the internet at some point crosses over one or many of our products in the process.
Fascinating stuff. And you had an interesting story in getting into Lumentum as well, right?
Yeah. So again, the power of a network, I guess. So I had left my prior role with an M&A kind of event. And so I was taking some time off, and I had a good friend of mine, Brian Lilly, reach out and say, hey, he was on the board of Lumentum. We've got a role that I think you'd be perfect for. I'd like you to meet the executive team. And I told him, basically, I'm not really looking yet. I'm not ready. I want to enjoy a little more of a break. And he said, just meet the team. And then I started pinging around. It turns out another good friend of mine, Tim Campos, had been on the board of JDSU, knew much of the exec team. A good friend who's now the CIO at ServiceNow, was the CIO at JDSU before, which is where Lumentum came from. So I had a half a dozen friends who I could connect with, talk with. So before I ever met the CEO, I had a pretty good picture of his leadership style, the culture of the company, the opportunity in front of Lumentum. And so I walked in pretty well informed and frankly fairly excited about the opportunity before I connected.
Hey, Ralph, that's a great story about the power of the network, right?
Absolutely.
Staying dialed in. So what are the challenges that are right now that are unresolved that you're working on that keep you up at night?
Yeah, so one of these, and we were kind of chatting a little in the green room before going live. hey, when are you going back to the office? Is it September? Is it October? Is it January? Is it, in some cases, for some people, is it never? So one, planning the return to the office with all the uncertainty we're facing. When we go back, what it looks like when we're back, who goes back, if they do go back, what's it look like? How do I implement contact tracing and health checks and so on without violating, personal privacy and HIPAA laws and Cal privacy? How do I effectively operate the business in this, whatever the new world looks like? And frankly, one of the big concerns is, say we all go back. What happens a month later when, again, something shifts and there's new news and a new set of guidelines? So we're really trying to plan in very uncertain times what that looks like. The other is, so we're an inherently physical company. We do digital things, but we do them in kind of analog ways. So we do a big focus of the company is R&D, developing the best product, the next product, the most innovative product in our sector. Well, what that means is I've got labs full of millions of dollars worth of equipment in the photonics space, in the chemical space, in chip design and manufacture. I can't outfit everybody's home office with a multi-million-dollar lab. So we do have people coming into the office, following protocol and working in those lab environments. We also manufacture things. So for us, we've figured out already how to digitally do new product introduction. We've got an R&D team in Zurich who developed our PicoBlade 3, our latest high-powered laser. It's being manufactured in Thailand. Well, no one from Zurich is flying to Thailand, which is what they normally would do to help kind of teach the operators and get the line up. Instead, we've put GoPro cameras on the forehead of the operators on the line and the supervisors, and we've got a remote, kind of dialogue where they're looking at the line. They're kind of the engineers in Zurich can see what's happening live, provide guidance, and kind of steer remotely. So it's a little interesting. It's a little different, right? But we're adapting wherever we can to use new technologies or current technologies to solve these problems of distance and of kind of what normally we would do in physical presence.
Hey, Ralph, talk to us a little bit about leading in these interesting times, leading and innovating in these interesting times, and gives the folks some inspiration and hope out of, as the lessons we're learning now, the journey we're all on individually and collectively, it's going to make us better, stronger, and sharper in the future.
Yeah, so I actually, a couple of weeks ago, wrote a little blog post in LinkedIn, and what I titled it was Digitally Woke, right? So we've all talked about this social movement and what's happening with social justice in the world. And the term woke there, it talks about people being aware of, kind of racial inequity and privilege and things like that. So in the digital world, I think many, many companies are moving, of course, much faster toward their digital, outcomes than before. But frankly, there are a lot of companies that aren't moving fast enough. And there are some organizations who think they're going digital, but I think they're essentially putting sort of digital dressing on an analog salad, right? They're just kind of going through the motions, nailing up Zoom. But again, they're taking their old meetings and they're just putting them into Zoom instead of rethinking, how to lead, how to communicate, and how to collaborate in a new world. So I like this term woke, right? So it was first used like in the 40s around, kind of this idea of social justice and so on. Woke is a past term of wake. So it means we're alert, we've awoken, we understand now, and you can't go back after you understand. It's like the Matrix metaphor of, you take the red pill, right? I'm aware now, I can see the Matrix, I'm not going back. So I think the big opportunity, the big excitement is, like I said before, we're doing things really differently that we never would have tried before, never would have been kind of forced to do before. So I'm excited that we can move faster, we can make better decisions, we can be more inclusive in those decisions, we can access talent that we could never access before in geographies that we're challenging. So essentially, I have an opportunity to make sure nobody hits the snooze button, right? Our leaders don't go back to sleep when this is all over, and instead we stay woke, we stay digitally woke and digitally aware, and we drive this sort of change forward.
Hey, Ralph, great points, great insight and thought leadership. Thanks so much for coming on the program. We're going to move to our next segment. We're going to see you in one of the breakouts here shortly, so stay with us. Thanks.
You got it.
So next up, we have Nicola Bassanovic from Nutanix. He's the Vice President and General Manager of Desktop Services. Nikola, welcome to the program.
Hi, Hunter. Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Great to see you. So give us a little high level of Nutanix. Where are you at right now on the edge, and how are you guys helping helping people with their infrastructure and their architecture?
Yeah, so look, people have been asking a question: is 2020 going to be the year of virtual desktop remote work? How can we help with all of that? And Nutanix really started 10 years ago by providing this super reliable and strong foundation for delivering remote work with virtual desktop and expanded in a full infrastructure kind of offering. And I think we've all aged probably 10 years in the last 6 years, in the last 6 months with everything that's been going on. And everything is moving at the speed of light. Nutanix has this strong tradition and DNA in robust, reliable appliances, but really the entire business is a software business that's been allowing our customers to shift shape from one workload to another workload, from office to remote office and then home, and then moving into their hybrid cloud future. So it's been an incredible learning and acceleration of experience delivery for both our customers, and we've learned a lot as well.
So tell us, thank you. So tell us, why has end user computing solutions become such a hot area or top priority?
Kind of end user computing, it really encompasses a set of technologies that are centered around the user. That's like end user computing, and user as in someone who works at a bank, someone who works at a hospital, someone who works at a call center. And those are many of these industries have seen the need to extend the physical desktop or physical device into a virtual sphere. Now, that has been the case in industries that were heavily regulated, that cared about security. And, those are financial services, healthcare, retail, have deployed virtual desktops before. The virus changed everything. And we are all remote workers these days, and the companies and organizations really need a way to extend that secure environment all the way to the end user, and each of our homes, apartments is becoming a remote office. How do you do that securely? And how do you string together different technologies? It could be from folks like Citrix, that are reimagining the future of workspace, and how can we work hand in hand with them to expand capacity for hosting this, so that when someone goes from 1,000 to 5,000 users working remotely, they don't have to buy 4,000 laptops or desktops and ship them somewhere. They can basically increase capacity in their data center, and then in matter of minutes provision a new secure workspace. How can we help with that? And how can we help people who are looking for this hybrid future, where it doesn't all have to be in the data center, but between the data center and the clouds, all under one umbrella? And we have great desktop as a service solutions for that as well.
Excellent. Any examples on how you help folks go to the remote workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, starts from a very strong customer base that we have. Nutanix has more than 17,000 customers globally, enterprises, federal institutions. Many of them are using Nutanix for virtual desktops and for VDI. That's been one of the key workloads for the company over the last 10 years, 11 years of its existence. So people who've been using this, it could be an airline, and we have major airlines as our customers. You can imagine what's going on with travel every day. There is we cannot travel now, we can't travel now, we cannot travel again. So, for example, we support call centers for major airlines, and major customers had to expand their capacity So we were able to do that literally in a matter of days, which is unheard of when it comes to a traditional heavy lift virtual desktop environment. Then we have a lot of, for example, state agencies that were not used at having people work from home. We have, for example, a major state lottery that had to send hundreds of people home and still keep operating. And we were able to offer desktop as a service solution called Frame that we offer, and really stand them up in matter of days. And you can imagine it's a major revenue source for a federal, or in this case, a state institution. So those are just some of the ways where, during March, April, in the time of scrambling, we were able to help our customers. Right now, everybody's thinking about future of work. How do we stay flexible, stay agile, ensure business continuity, even when we come back to office in some capacity? How are we going to make sure that, next time there is a flare up or next time there is something else, we can keep business going and in fact thriving?
Interesting stuff. Amazing times, right? You can't possibly imagine this one in business school or anywhere. Did you have a pandemic business plan or strategy or DR, right? When you think of customers, how do you help them address their application as well as their desktop delivery challenges?
Well, it all starts with software-defined software infrastructure that is flexible, agile, and it offers a lot of options to our customers on where to run it, starting from their data center, what the platform is going to look like, and then extending into the cloud. Like, everybody's acknowledging that the public cloud is a tremendous innovation. But I also think that this pandemic opened all of our eyes that, hey, maybe it's not the smartest idea to rely on Uber and not have a car. Because when you really need it, that Uber might not be safe or might not be available. Same goes for a number of solutions in the sharing economy. Now, that doesn't mean that shared services are going away, but I think the way people really think about what do I need to own and what I can rent and how can I move things on the IT side, on the infrastructure side, from on-prem to the cloud and then into multi-cloud. Do I really want to be locked down into one example? As I'm talking, I'm looking at some of our systems, and one of the major 3 clouds is having a increased rate of VM outage right now. And that's something that we got to live with. It's not that anybody's going to have 100% uptime at all times. How do you spread your bets between, your own services, your own operations, and someone else's operations? So Nutanix's first 10 years was defining agile software infrastructure in the data center. I think our next 10 years are all about digital hybrid cloud infrastructure with a set of options that start with a great storage and hypervisor, but then they extend into a number of products across file servers, across automation, across, as I mentioned, the data center, desktop as a service that can give IT the way to support remote workforce, digital workforce, and also extend into other areas like databases and DevOps. So we've been doing that for 10 years, hyper-converged infrastructure, we believe, and its portability and ability to consume in bite sizes. That means it could start as small as a handful of servers and extend into 1,000 of nodes, and porting it very seamlessly from one place to another, from data center to the cloud and back, is what's going to define the future of infrastructure, and along with it, the future of remote work, with VDI and desktop as a service being the key workload.
Hey, Nicola, thanks so much for coming on the program today, and thank you for Nutanix's support of the HMG platform and network. Really appreciate it. How can people learn more from you, reach you and learn more about Nutanix?
So we have nutanix.com/EUC for end user computing. We have plenty of resources. We encourage everyone to come learn more how we're helping millions of users on a daily basis wake up and continue with their work under these new circumstances. And it's north of 17,000 customers and north of 3 million users that are doing their work and relying on Nutanix every day at these challenging times.
Nicole, again, thanks for coming on the program. Great to see you. Good job.
Thank you.
Bye now. Next up, we have Jim Swanson, the EVP and Group CIO of Johnson & Johnson. Jim, welcome to the program. Great to see you.
Yep, same here.
Hey, it's what an amazing journey we've all been on, right, as tech leaders in the past 120 days. What is the pandemic and this most immediate crisis, what are the lessons learned? What's it taught you as it relates to leadership? And where's the opportunity for the tech leader?
I think we've really doubled down on things like flexibility, leading through ambiguity, real-time action and decision, really relying on your people and pushing decisions down into the organization where it's closest to where you can have the biggest impact. J&J is, as you know, a global company. We have about 140,000 employees around the world. We have 3 major sectors, pharma, consumer, medical devices. We're in over 70 countries around the world. And as the pandemic hit in China, we learned a lot. And we took that learning and applied it as the pandemic moved into Europe and then the US and Latin America. And it was really a team event. It wasn't just IT. It was IT with facilities, with HR, with commercial, supply chain R&D, because we make life-saving medicines, and it wasn't like we can just shut those down. So how do you manage really critical product and get it distributed? How do you ensure employee safety, which was a critical priority for us? And how do you enable a connected workforce around the globe not in years and months, but a lot of times hours and days? And so we certainly, we learned a lot. We adapted really quickly. We've gotten a lot of good positive impact with our business partners around how quickly we've been able to not only maintain the connectivity in the company, but also how we then changed the paradigm to how we digitally interact with customers, how we can use decision science and models to better support our logistics that we're changing almost daily because of limited ability to get and ship product, how we can enable our vaccine business and our vaccine for COVID. So just a lot of good learnings and applied leadership. But I really think that leading with humility, leading with thought and purpose, relying on your really strong team at the point of where the issue is, and then learning as you go and being adaptive are all key elements that we've really applied at scale that have been very effective for us. And we'll continue on those as we return to work and kind of do the exact thing in the opposite, but then sustain that capability as we go forward.
You know, Jim, we know culture means everything, right? So what have you learned regarding culture over the past few months in this work from home or work remote environment?
Culture is kind of a fuzzy thing. What we learn is, one, the importance of inclusion and diversity, because without that, you get mono thinking, and you need to include your regions, your diverse thinkers, your genders and your ethnicities, and all of those things come into play really strongly. And you'll end up with a better result if you do that inclusion. Second, as we looked at how we applied our culture, if you will, J&J is anchored in its credo. And our credo starts with care for our patients, the nurses that are taking care of healthcare, our customers. That's where we start. We then go to our employees, focus on safety, well-being, and health of our employees. Then we go to our communities. How are we supporting and enable the communities? And if we do all 3 of those, we then will give benefit to shareholders. That credo has been around since, I think, 1940. That still guides our culture every single day. And it's what's especially unique about J&J, that really, you don't have to ask how we're going to operate. That culture and that credo drives it, and we live it every day. And it's been a wonderful asset for us to reinforce that culture and leverage it, which we did.
Very fascinating stuff. Very cool. You know, today's theme is reimagining business and the way of work. How has this opportunity allowed you at J&J Technology to help reimagine the business?
Well, I've been with J&J about 10 months now, so I'm still kind of, I call it my honeymoon period, but I think that was over after week 2. But you really start to accelerate when you have a pandemic occur and how you kind of use the opportunity to shape for the future. And so just like I'm sure everybody that's on this call, you've seen within your companies, the reliance of technology and how important it is, whether it be just keeping your employees connected. We went from 40,000 remote connections to 140,000. Or we think about calls like this, we went from 3.5 million minutes of video conferencing a day across J&J to 15.5 million minutes, so 3.5 times increase. We went into how we interact differently with our customers. We were doing, if I use Latin America, over 3,000 in-person sales reps to customer visits a day to 0 because hospitals were shutting down. They could only deal with sick patients and COVID. They didn't have time to look at other things. Elective surgery shut down. So we switched to digital. And now we're doing thousands of digital interactions a day. We've used this as an opportunity to kind of look at how technology can not just sustain our business, how does it develop and grow it? And I'll give you one really great example I'm sure everybody would be keenly interested in, is working on a vaccine. And we're really proud of that for trying to solve the COVID problem. And we use technology to do a 4x scale up in our vaccine production. So we used data science, machine learning, and simulation to simulate the manufacturing process. We used our platform and tools like Lab Notebook and our operations platform to model the workflow. We use data across a number of different environments, research data, clinical data, commercial manufacturing data to feed the models. And we use scalable compute, our cloud computing, our collaboration environments, and worked across not only J&J, but across our partners to have a 4x increase in the scale up of our vaccine production from producing 1 batch every 2 weeks to 2 batches every half week. And they continue to grow that. So it was a great example of a really met need in supporting our vaccine production for COVID to using technology and data science to drive outcomes and then show those outcomes in real time and not doing it in years and months, but doing it in weeks. Great. And we've just been doing that as we've been leveraging our technology footprint across the board and a lot of support from our executive committee, a lot of opportunity to show technology can transform a business.
J&J is one of the top companies of all time in the U.S. history. I think when people think of it, it's got an incredible brand and an amazing name. So when you think about this whole transitioning to virtual work, what were the wins and what were the challenges?
I think for everybody, certainly the wins is this ease of connectivity. We created reliable connectivity, not just in our network connections and our video conferencing, but keeping systems running. We had something called on-site superheroes, and these were the small fraction of folks in supply chain or in my organization that were keeping things going, and we really applaud them for doing that, and we made sure they were safe. But the majority of the workforce was working remotely. And so we saw that we can be productive. We saw that we can connect in different ways using technology. We saw that we can try new things, like I mentioned, how we interact digitally with our customers in differentiated ways. And we had the ability to learn together. If I think about the crisis management team I'm on, it's this collection of different skill sets and background, and go back to that diversity comment, that collection of people ended up creating a better outcome and result because of our differentiated thought leadership we brought together to solve the problem around how do we manage this crisis to keep employees safe and keeping vital healthcare products in the market. The downside, we have kind of what we call Zoom myopia a bit. You're staring too much at the screen and you're always on. There's no downtime. So we had to institute, hey, there's downtime. I use my own organization. I got people all around the world, and we were doing my weekly stand-up calls Friday morning, my time at 8 a.m. and it was 8 p.m. in Singapore. We'd say, okay, well, it's 8 p.m. It's not too bad, but it's Friday night for them. And you think about the last thing you want to think about on a Friday night of a long week is having to get on a teleconference. So we switched it to Thursday, which was their Friday morning. And so just thinking about the employee, thinking about how their challenges, what do they need, and really being very thoughtful. We do weekly pulse surveys, and we use that data to assess what do we got right, we do more. What did we get wrong, we adapt. and we engage them in the dialogue. That becomes really important when you walk in their shoes. What do they need? Because they're dealing not just with making sure their work gets done, but they may have elder care. There's somebody they're dealing with. They may have small children and they have no daycare for that. They may be worried about a sick family member. And so really understanding both the emotional component of where your employees are, the intellectual component, how do you capitalize that, the globalness and get that input and insight and continual feedback, communication, all become really important that we've learned as we go forward. And when we all come back and working on a return to work plan, we have different markets that are back, others that are still in wave 0 and 1. We'll leverage that learning as we go forward. And I think it'll sustain itself for a long time.
Hey, Jim, thanks again for being on the program and supporting HMG. We have a panel coming up. Please stay with us. You'll be engaged there as well.
Great. Thanks, Hunter.
Great to see you, my friend. Next up is Marcus Fowler, Director of Strategic Threat at Darktrace. Marcus, welcome to the program.
Hey, Hunter, how are you doing today?
Great. Hey, just a little context of Darktrace for folks that may not know of Darktrace.
Absolutely. You know, world-leading AI company focusing on cybersecurity, using our AI platform and its deployment to provide unparalleled visibility across that complex digital environment, as well as using supervised learning to supercharge and augment that triage and that investigation, helping out those security teams. And then also using it in the deep learning sense in terms of autonomous response. How do you respond to a machine speed attack with a machine speed response in that moment of potential future crisis and ending it there?
Interesting. You guys certainly are a leader, a real forefront leader that we watch and a disruptor. When you think of this global disruption from the pandemic, when we switched to the remote workforce, what are the lessons learned that you experienced cross industry with all your clients?
Sure. The first was concerns over visibility and the shift to extreme change with regards to what they were going to see when they moved to that work from home environment. And, what we saw from them, certainly, and I think across the HMG community, was business operations first, right? You need that business to continue for the security to be there. So security was really playing catch up in terms of being established and being where they needed to be in terms of providing that security. And something that we saw was heavily leaning on different areas in their environment. How are they thinking about cloud? What does it, and this was mentioned by Nick with Nutanix, what does the endpoint now mean? And different applications, more heavily dependent on SaaS. So a lot of heavy transition, but I think the other side of this, a lot of great lessons learned and best practices for where we need to head in terms of defending the dynamic workforce and being adaptive to change no matter where it comes, from the business transformation or pandemic or even weather disruption, right? No matter how it comes at you.
Excellent. It's mid-July and organization security teams all over the world have been navigating this digital and cultural transformations internally and with their customers. What are you seeing out there?
So, I think for us, it was really kind of looking and kind of adapting our approach of this isn't so much anymore about the digital environment and digital assets. You have to include in there that dynamic workforce and what the next set of work is going to look like. It's not going to be you're at home and I'm in the office. It's going to be you're at home today, but you're in the office tomorrow, but you're in. And we need to be sure that we're adapting and providing security no matter where that is. We've also seen a heavy dependence, acceleration really in terms of digital transformation in those software as a service, those SaaS applications, and the cloud. We've seen that more and more. And that was one of the places where we as a company pivoted our R&D in terms of accelerating in that space. Where are we? How do we provide more visibility? How do we provide security teams more peace of mind and reliance, allowing that business resilience in those spaces that they might be less attuned to or feel less secure about?
We look at this re-entry to work, whatever that's going to look like, the hybrid organizational model. What are the threats there when people do return to work?
Sure. And I think that my kind of first piece of advice is you had to kind of sprint away from work to work from home as a forcing function of the pandemic. You don't have to sprint back, right? It can be phased, it can be methodical, it can be planned so that security can be in step with that approach back to whatever that hybrid looks like, right? So ensure your security teams are in lockstep with how they're going to provide security with wherever you head. In terms of threats, uncertainty and anxiety is always a breeding ground for attackers, right? It's a buffet for attackers. We saw massive spikes in attacks due to all the anxiety and starve for information and spear phishing. You're going to see the same thing as this uncertainty and who's going back and what's my company doing. You also, I think you have some of the more sophisticated actors laying in wait, right? They're hoping devices that they've implanted are going to go back to corporate networks, and they're going to be able to then move slow and low and go after it. So I think visibility is going to be key, both at the endpoint, but also when the endpoint starts trickling back to that corporate network.
You know, Marcus, a little bit more about the learning aspect of your AI aspect within Darktrace. There's something very unique about it, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I will say one thing. So it's an unsupervised approach in terms of understanding and normal. So that means there's not an external training data set, right? It's built off models and classifiers, and it learns kind of you and your sense of self and your normal. So that means as we went to this extreme change, it didn't have to get retrained. It didn't have to get we didn't have to touch it at all. It actually adapted really quickly to that extreme change very well, providing near seamless visibility from an office-centric to a work-from-home-centric security posture. And that really blew us away because, you kind of know that the technology is strong, but you don't get this kind of load-bearing extreme test to watch your technology perform. And we were really impressed. And across our user base, because I was checking in with any number of current customers across our 4,000, they were really, it allowed them to have peace of mind and understanding and visibility where they were worried that they wouldn't have had it or they'd be blind to what was happening because of that extreme change.
Marcus, I'm sure you folks provide kind of benchmarking or reviews of one's security stance or posture. How do folks get in touch with you, and what does that look like?
So I think, you just launched the marketplace today. I was happy to see Darktrace was the example that was clicked on, and we saw Nikola Bozinovic, our CEO. I think I want people to be leveraging that marketplace. I think that's a great place. I think, HMG is doing a really great job in terms of trying to adapt and iterate and improve this virtual experience, this virtual conferencing. And I think the marketplace is a fantastic way, because the one place I think we really were missing is, how do you get to that secondary touch point after there's a good conversation or you get excited? It's like, okay, where do I go now? And the more it's attached to the overall conference environment, the better off it is. So I say, let's use the thing that you've created and point them at that marketplace.
Excellent. Appreciate the endorsement that wasn't rehearsed at all. Awesome, Marcus. When you think about kind of the roadmap going forward, as people do go back to work, what are the 1, 2, or 3 things they should be concerned about as the architecture changes once again? So
I think it is, first off, do you have the visibility? Are you seeing all the areas that your people are working off of? And there's a lot of concern over endpoint and what people might be doing outside of a VPN or something like that. So I think it is, are you sure that you have the visibility across all the digital transformation or the digital requirements that you put in place? I think the other is, how are you thinking about how have you augmented that security team with things like AI and the application? I mentioned supercharging the investigation. I'd say the 2 areas where we saw our customers lean most heavily over the crisis and will continue forward was that they had limited time to be at their machine doing threat hunting. So that cyber AI analyst that did a lot of that investigation already allowed them to kind of start their day from a point of action with prioritized threats rather than initial investigation on where should I go. And the other was the autonomous response. When they were distracted, when they couldn't be on that machine at all, they knew something was preventing anything that was outside normal business operations, right? And that enforcing normal is such a power of strength for companies rather than trying to predict attacker. Threat intelligence is important in terms of enriching your understanding, but it really isn't the way to go to stopping the attack.
Interesting times, right?
Yeah.
Marcus, thanks for coming on the program, and thanks for being part of HMG Strategies, HMG Live.
Yep, I always enjoy it, Hunter.
And thanks for Darktrace really helping launch the marketplace. Really.
You bet.
We'll see you soon.
Yep.
Thanks, Marcus. Hey, next up is Brian Brockway. He's the VP and CTO of Commvault. Brock, he goes by Brock, which is very cool. Brock, you there? Welcome to the program, Brock. We're assembling back from the breakout here. We're about 82 folks climbing to 100. Hey, Brock, a little context of Commvault, if you will, and why Commvault matters now. Your mute's on. Oh, you're muted? There we go.
There we go. Now I'm unmuted.
Brock's a real industry pro, guys, and a thought leader. So we're about to learn something really unique here. Thanks, Brock.
Hey, thanks, Hunter. Yes, I think just to give a little context, with Commvault, one of the key focuses for us has always been thinking about data, protection, recover, security, all the different aspects around it. And I think as I've been listening through a number of the different conversations today and a lot of the great advice and the agility, many of those are all being fueled by data moving faster, moving across different environments, having a lot of people remotely touch and collaborate through the environments back and forth. And I think from our perspective, what it's doing is it's kind of also increasing a focus on the risk that what happens if some of that data flow starts to slow down or shut down. So we've seen a lot of unfortunate, not just mistakes, but a lot of bad actors now coming into the environments and the distributed networks to cause havoc and put a refocus on your data security and really also your data recovery strategies.
Brock, you got some news, right, with Microsoft that recently hit the wire. What's going on with Microsoft? Yeah,
it's well, we're quite excited. So we've been a strong partner and customer and partner and vendor and everything else with Microsoft for many years now. But one of the key things that we did a few years ago is we started really taking a lot of our capability set, starting to really thread it natively into the Microsoft environments. One of the great key aspects of that is we had a lot of customers coming back and saying they were much more interested in more SaaS delivery of protection and recovery services. So we launched a new program about a year ago. It worked so well and it got our friends at Microsoft more interested. We said, what about if we get together and just kind of really reinforce the strategic relationship? So it's a new service we call Metallic, and it is right or timely, I should say, focused these days around a lot of the cloud-based workloads. So your 365 environments, a lot of your cloud-based workloads, how do you extend the protection recovery operations, especially as everybody moved out of the office 6 months ago and suddenly cropped up, 6,000 endpoints. How do you add protection to that quickly? You may not want to have a solution that lasts 4 years. You may only want it for a short period of time. And that's what we're now able to adapt and do with Microsoft together. It's been a great partnership.
Hey, Brock, we've been talking about technology mattering more than ever in the C-suite, in the boardroom, in the line of business. And I remember back in 08, 09, the famed CEO of JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon, was really well known for saying his bank was a technology company. Well, here we're now 12 years later, right? And truly every company is a tech company. Every CEO should be embracing technology in the C-suite. Every CIO, CTO, and CISO really should be the rock stars. And we all know that data and that customer intimacy is all driven by data and the effectiveness of data, offering insights, data offering market intelligence, customer preferences, customer intimacy, and the key being data protection, right? So talk to us about how does someone go about making sure your data is safe and secure?
Yeah, and you hit it spot on. So as things are fueling and things are moving fast and quickly, it's really the same focus now to say it's not an afterthought, but you have to kind of proactively build it in. How do we start to incorporate smart data protection policy? How do we adapt security parameters into the environments? Self-service is a fantastic tool to accelerate new programs. A little bit of the downside is either you assume the DevOps people are also going to make copies and do retention and do compliance and make a couple of copies, but nobody ever thinks about that. They work too fast. That's where you have to have an adaptive strategy to say, how can we keep pace with those changes? How can we ensure copies are being maintained? We're not oversubscribing. We're not snapping, 600 times, because that can be a very expensive proposition. By the same course of action, any of the critical things, we just, developed a brand new model. It's very impactful for our customer experience. Did somebody also build the security and the protection behind it to ensure we can get it back in case something bad happens?
So what happens when something bad happens? How big are the potential losses?
Yeah, and I think this is a big shift change we've seen really in the last 2 years. A lot of the ransomware that we saw a couple of years ago was a little bit more, I'm going to say, focused and granular in the attack zones. A handful of laptops, a couple of things. A couple of them made the high-profile news accounts. In the last 2 years, though, we've seen a just massive increase in much more of the malware type environments. It's not just about locking you away from your data and having to pay a ransom. It's full out utter destruction of your data infrastructure, coming in and really, bringing your business to a halt. We've seen, some of the leading analysts have come off to, put a number against, kind of a $10 million at the cost and the impact of one of these events. I'll say personally, we just worked with a customer a couple of quarters ago in Europe that basically had to shut down their supply chain. They got hit. It propagated through the environments in the course of like under an hour. And that ended up being about $100 million cost of operations. So it took them, weeks to go back and rebuild everything and restart and turn the supply chain back on again. And I think a lot of the afterthought that people come away from that is it's not a one-time event. If it's happened once, you know how easily it can come in. That's where you have to really start taking preparatory actions. How do we lock it down? How do we put foundations in place? How do we roll test and treat this in much more of a readiness type condition?
So let's talk more about that readiness kind of model. Is it a model or a feature or a roadmap?
Yeah, no, I'd say a lot of this has been kind of learned strategy and philosophy following many of these events from the last couple of years. And it's really coming back over and looking at your structures today, where your data sets are. Do I have them secured and hardened as much as we can? Do we have some role separation? Do we have some geographic separation of the data sets? It's not just a disaster recovery model anymore. It's a business continuity. And like I said, some of these things, you don't see them on the news and it gives you 2 days to react to it. It happens overnight and then you're responding to it on a massive scale. So a lot of it is the foundation hardening that then brings yourself to the nature of how do we go back and exercise and test these scenarios. It's not a paper-based exercise. We actually have to go through the full iteration of being able to go back and rebuild, reconstitute applications, either in your existing environments. And I think in more and more cases, we're seeing a lot of people start to embrace the cloud as a fantastic elastic resource. I can come over, I can dial up, I can use a lot of storage, I can use a lot of compute in the cloud on demand. I can use it for 2 days, I can use it for 2 months. When I'm back and ready to situate, I can then bring it all back down and put it back on-prem if I need to.
So we have a 4-point model, right?
Yeah, so the model really kind of starts off with that secure nature, kind of how solid is your foundation. It's the validate phases of how do I go off and start to do some of this testing. And I need to test not just a single system or a VM. I need to test an entire application group. Do I have the databases? Do I have all the systems? Do I have the AD system? Is it all tied together? Have I kind of actually proven to myself and the business so we can get it back? Then you really kind of get to the broader case of a lot of the classification. And it's taking your overall environment and making sure, have we organized it for recovery? What's the most critical systems? Do we have the plans in place? Do we have the right kind of configurations in place? Have we kind of set ourselves up for success when we can actually logically think through it when we're not in a reactionary mode? And then the last final step is taking all three of those elements and saying, how do we really then use automation to really make our life a lot easier on a go-forward basis? Can we use policies and controls, a little bit of AI to go off and measure our state of readiness on a regular basis to ensure, we're green and we can sleep soundly at night? Or if we have a red, area that got exposed, how do we have the team go off and put corrective action in as quickly as possible?
Interesting stuff. Brock, you guys work cross industry, tech companies, consumer package, insurance, financial services.
Yeah, absolutely. We find data doesn't. Data is a kind of a universal need, but to a lot of cases, it's then the applications, it's the infrastructure, it's the different environments. So even in today's sessions, I see a couple of familiar names that we work with on a regular basis, but in more and more cases too, we've been seeing customers come over and say, it's not always a wholesale. You can start to say, as you start to move some of your workloads to new environments, you start to go into the cloud environments. Like we talked about before with some of the Microsoft things, those are usually good places to start to come in, modernize, and really get yourself tied together, and then come back over and say, all right, how do we then walk it back to some of our more traditional and more challenging infrastructures? That's the nice thing. We've been in business long enough that we have a deep bench of integration that goes back to some of the old traditional applications that people thought don't even exist anymore, but we know in manufacturing and other environments, they're still cranking along.
Hey, Brock, thanks for coming on the program today, and thanks for supporting HMG strategy. How can people get in touch with you and Commvault?
Well, I'll drop my contact in the chat list over here, and I think we also put together a great white paper. Kind of talks about this whole recovery readiness. It's a good thought piece to come back over, check with the teams, to think about the dimensions, think about how much do you have your own environments locked down, and are there places for improvement. So I think it's a great thing. Download from the thank yous, and we'd be more than happy to follow up any questions anybody has.
Great. Thanks, Brock. Great to see you. Thanks for coming on the program. Good to see you. Okay, next up, we have Tony Leng. Tony joined the program. Tony's the managing director of Diversified Search. Most everyone knows Tony in the Valley. Most everyone knows Tony all over North America. I would say a global top tier search management executive, former CEO, by the way, and diversity and inclusion, our panel. Tony, take it away.
Well, thank you, Hunter. I really appreciate that. And I would ask my panel to turn on their videos and unmute themselves. And while I'm doing this opening monologue, will the HMG staff please put up the poll that we want to have right at the start on diversity and inclusion? So that's our topic for today. We've heard a lot about, from Ralph and from Jim and from others, about how COVID and everything else is really forcing us to rethink our business completely from a strategic perspective. Well, part of that is, the thing that's happening, if you pay attention, is Amy Cooper and George Floyd and demonstrations. And there's a people element to this disruption that I think everybody needs to know and understand. And that's diversity and inclusion, and for leaders to listen to voices that they don't often and perhaps don't hear enough of. And that's, as I say, diversity and inclusion. And this panel is going to look at that from a macro perspective. How do you bring people in? How do you set your business up appropriately? And then we'll talk about some inclusion. What are some inclusion best practices that your organization needs to implement and that you personally need to implement? So we're going to start off by having the panel introduce themselves in this order, if you don't mind. Shamla, Rashmi, Earl, and SHADAAB. So if the four of you would quickly introduce yourselves as to who you are and where you work, I'd appreciate that. And then we'll launch right in.
Sounds good. So I'm Shamla Naidoo. I am a managing partner in IBM in the security business unit particularly.
Hi, I'm Rashmi Kumar. I'm SVP and CIO at HP Enterprise.
Earl?
I'm Earl Newsome. I'm the CIO for the Americas at Linde PLC.
Great. And SHADAAB?
Hi, this is SHADAAB. Hi, thank you very much, Tony. This is SHADAAB. I am with Charles Schwab. My role is I am the executive leader for digital data and analytics services in the corporate risk management function.
Great. So kind of first question, which is more at the macro level, Who's driving D&I in your organization? Who's driving that strategy? And perhaps any reflection on, what it takes to be successful in terms of the organization embracing D&I. Let's go in that order again, if you don't mind. Shamla, you first.
So, great. So Tony, boards are responsible for governance of the companies they represent, and talent, succession planning, and culture are key elements to that governance. Diversity and inclusion is the foundation of all three of those elements. So frankly, if diversity and inclusion is not being driven from the top down, I don't think you actually make a major difference, right? And what I'd like to add to this is, at IBM, we see that play out. 11 years before the Civil Rights Act was passed, Thomas Watson, our then CEO, issued a policy to the company. And the policy basically said, he called it the equal opportunity policy. And what he said in the policy, to paraphrase, was, as long as you have the personality, the background, and the talent to fill a role, you should not be discriminated against based on race, color, or creed. And so, I think that holds true today. If we look at it on June 8th, Arvind Krishna, our now CEO, wrote a letter to Congress to issue and to propose additional policy changes toward racial equality. And so I do think that this topic has to be driven from the top down. It is essential.
Great. Rashmi, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. And Shadab, if you muted yourself, you will not be able to unmute yourself, just FYI. So, no, I completely agree. Very, very powerful points that you just made. We need to get to a point when our companies are leading by example, top down. If you look at HPE, and there are 25 other such companies, 54% of the board identifies with one or more diverse group, making it one of the most diverse company. That kind of forces us as the leadership team to focus on all types of diversity, definitely internally of the company, but as well as to our suppliers, because again, I always talk about ecosystems. We need to kind of bring all of us together and make all of us better. We are trying very, very hard to ensure that this becomes a business imperative. The point here is not about making anybody's pie or piece of the share smaller. It's about how do we bring more and more underrepresented societies in the workforce so that we kind of grow our economies. There was an article about how if we want to double everybody's salary every 10 years, that's the path we have been through economic growth, we need a GDP of 3% for every country, and that cannot happen if we don't improve the consumption. And the only way we improve the consumption is providing jobs and capabilities to the broader group of people and enable them to get the education, to get the exposure, to get the jobs, so that their standard of living kind of holistically improve. And I personally have been feeling very passionately about it, have been lucky to work for very, very large companies who are not only doing lip service, but trying to put programs and capabilities in place to enable the leaders to enable that for the organizations to achieve.
Right. Thanks. Earl, what else would you like to add to that?
Well, I think just you're asking who drives this in the company. I mean, for us, our chief diversity officer has really got the single accountability for driving it. But I do agree with what everyone else is saying. It's got to be a leadership agenda, because if it's not on the leadership agenda, then it doesn't actually happen. And I think we're pivoting as a B2B company, primarily as an old industrial company. I think we're in that awakening, and we see. I think a lot of companies are awakening to this. We had been primarily kind of as a U.S. business, now moving to more of a global business based upon the merger, and we saw some of the focus on in the U.S. shift away to being only gender diversity. Now I think all forms of diversity, this great awakening that's occurring right now because of the infinity crisis mirror, as I've described it, we're all facing, that began with COVID, then economic, then, obviously adding on social injustice and racial injustice, then adding on to that mental and now, but leadership crisis as companies step into that void, in this great awakening that's happening in organizations and companies such as ours and old industrial companies. We're now starting to have that crucial conversation, and we will, start having this more prevalent, I believe, in the boardroom and in, the management directives of the company, because while numbers are not the goal, numbers do tell a story.
Right. And SHADAAB, now to kind of take that but shift it slightly. So when you're out there and you're looking to bring people into the organization, and you have a diversity imperative, do you look at people differently? Do you make allowances for perhaps individuals who may be Black people who didn't have perhaps the financial capability or the background to be able to get into an Ivy League university? They had to work while at college. Do you look at people like that slightly differently and give them an opportunity? Or do you say, I'm only going to pick the best people? How do you approach that in a meaningful way with respect to recruiting? And then, and this is going to be where we're going to end up with everybody, tell us about the best practices you have to include such people into your organization, because that's really, where the rubber meets the road. As individuals, we need to make sure that we make a welcoming environment for people whose voices are not traditionally heard. How do we make sure that they are heard to round out our strategies? So why don't you have a go at that?
Great, thank you, Tony. I think, we are stronger through diversity. And, when we are increased focus on diversity, that means the talent comes from a broader spectrum of human qualities and strength. And, I'm part of Charles Schwab, and Schwab was founded on the belief that the investment industry needed to be more inclusive. That means more people from the Main Street should be able to enjoy the same benefits as those on the Wall Street. That spirit of inclusiveness has been a guiding principle ever since. With me, I've followed the same principle because we are dedicated to maintaining and building a culture that values and reflects the strengths of every employee. And effectively, when you start focusing on that, we know that through this diversity, we gain a deeper and a wider range of perspectives and experience, which supports our clients through our business strategy. And this is how, when I'm making a decision about, a candidate, I'm trying to build upon not only the inclusiveness of the workplace, but also a diverse marketplace also. Because, everybody loves to hire people that they look like them, but you have to think out from that perspective, and you have to have that willingness and openness, to kind of create that sense of flexibility within and challenge your bias, because everybody carries that conscious or unconscious bias. And effectively that vulnerability brings that inclusiveness, and that only happens when you're ready to embrace that idea.
Great, thanks. Shamla, what do you want to add?
So, I think that traditional recruiting has a place. However, if you look at the employment shortage in STEM-related areas, there is no way for us to recruit our way out of this shortage of talent. We need new pathways toward employment. And frankly, one of those new pathways has to be without traditional or advanced degrees. Because one, as an industry, we don't have the time to wait for people to go through 4-year degree programs. The other thing is that many people don't have the time to spend for 4-year degree programs. So really we need to think more vocationally about this. What kind of vocational training can we bring to the table? But I also think that, it's easy to say that in words. Practically though, what does that mean? That means we don't have the talent. We're not going to recruit it easily. Therefore, we have to create it. And so I think every organization has to either create the talent from scratch, be willing to do the heavy lifting, or go partner with others who can create the talent for them. But I think the idea of creating new talent is not negotiable if we have any chance at all of solving the shortage, and then still allowing our companies to innovate and become future forward.
Great. Rashmi?
Yeah, that's such a great point, Shamla, that you made. At SPE, we engage in Code Wars event where we engage high school girls to come in and participate competitively. I was just speaking to University of Houston Data Science Institute, which we are sponsors for, and we are doing a summer data science boot camp through them for girls to learn how to code. The point I'm trying to make is supporting Shamla's point. Every company, as we talked about, Ralph mentioned, every company becoming technology company, there is not enough talent. And school does provide a great foundation for it, but does not bring in every component of knowledge and behaviors that we need in our workforce today. When I work in IT, I need people who can connect the dots across product team, operations team, customer service team, supply chain team. It's very hard to teach that to somebody. So what we focus on in our hiring is more of a talent versus skills and competency. Technology is changing too fast. Do we have people who are hungry to learn, eager to grow, and ready to commit? When those three ingredients in any person, it doesn't matter what school you're from, what country you're from, what city you're from, which company you're coming from, but we look for those three components in our panel interviews to see that people who are able to bring those. And the biggest hunger I have seen from folks who have come from underrepresented communities or neighborhoods, my best leader in IT who is running our as a service transformation program, she's from Chico State University, have been with us for 12 or 13 years, and look where she has reached in a short time frame. So I feel like hiring right people is important, but then providing them the platform, the kind of, I wouldn't call it training, but the way Shamla talks about it, vocational capabilities, to provide them mentorship, sponsorship, ingredients for leadership, so that they can think differently and not only drive themselves, but drive the broader organization.
Right.
Change.
Right. So Earl, you know, we're getting into the realm of what I call inclusion best practices. What do you do that's most effective? You know, if you've recruited somebody, how do you make sure that people are successful when they've joined the team? What do you personally do? How do you mentor? How do you guide? How do you do this to make sure that your organization is getting the most out of a very diverse group of people on your team?
All right, and I'll get to that. I think that's a very important thing because inclusion is an action. But I do want to reflect a little bit on the word that you said to me. When we're looking for quality candidates, I don't think we, you know, specifically those that are unrepresented, we're not looking for people to lower their standards about what we consider an acceptable candidate. We want you to spread where you look. Because somebody took a chance on you when you got your role. So let's spread our look out there, look for alternate ways of measuring competency, and then via those alternate measures of competency, you can find competent folks that are underrepresented to bring into your organization. So not ask you to lower your standards, just spread where you look. Right. And I think that's important.
Great point.
And when we talk about inclusion, and I think about diversity, inclusion, and collaboration, we talk about, and I want to use this simple way of describing, you know, diversity, inclusion, and collaboration and creativity. To me, is diversity is being invited to the dance. You know, inclusion is being asked to dance, but collaboration and creativity are all about being involved in who's the DJ, who the attendee list is, where the venue is, you know, what food's being served, you know, et cetera. So the way I want to think about inclusion is by those actions, about what are you doing to collaborate and to spawn and bring forth the creativity of that diverse population that you've now, hopefully, that you've created. And so we do that. We have four philosophies. One is called Know Me, Invest in Me, See Me, and Think of Me. So the Know Me for our underrepresented, we, you know, involved in whatever month it is, whether it's LGBTQ or is it Black History Month or Women's Month, you know, what are we doing to really know our diverse population and then really drive out in our ERGs to take somebody who's a member of an ERG, you know, out to lunch at least twice a year. Then invest in the diverse population by either lunch and learns, peer mentoring, onboarding capabilities, career development opportunities. How do we see that diverse population, get them access and visibility into the C-suite, PR and branding, making sure that we have an internal and an external strategy that supports our message about really involving and being inclusive. And then lastly, we have to think of them. And that means sponsorship in mentoring opportunities, and more sponsor than mentoring. Sponsors about really helping somebody, having somebody take a chance on them, and then making sure we are inclusive in our succession planning processes. So again, real practical advice: know them, invest in them, see them, and think of them as part of your strategy.
That's great. And I want to give SHADAAB, Rashmi, and Shamla an opportunity to also kind of give us their best practices. So let's start with you, SHADAAB, and then run through.
Great, thank you. Diversity is the range of that human differences, right? I mean, in example, we have difference between the gender, the sex, or sexual orientation, or the race. And inclusion is the one that, just like Earl said, it's an action that unlocks the power of diversity, by ensuring that different perspectives are brought to light. And from a best practice perspective, you have to kind of make it part, not only part of your strategy, but part of your actionable strategy. Because if you're actionable about that, then you're able to demonstrate that. And that demonstration not only happens at one individual level, but should happen at a community level. And that's why a lot of investments back into the community is one of the focus that, a lot of the organizations, take, which are very diversity and inclusion centric. Like I was previously with Kaiser Permanente. There was a $2.2 billion of investment, Tony, that. That Kaiser used to do in the communities, from a community benefit perspective. Similarly, Schwab has a similar perspective. You not only invest in the communities through outreach, but also forged relationships which develop into, meaningful contracts that kind of translates, and it uplifts the whole community, not one individual, but the whole community uplifts.
Great, thanks. Rashmi, what are your thoughts?
Yes, so great point made so far, Earl. I really liked your analogies and metaphors. I look at it this way, that when I'm in meetings or my leaders are in meetings with a broader workforce, and it does not matter where do they come from, are they even counted as diverse or not? End of the day, there are team members, our employees, we need to include them to give better results. And most of us are about answers because we all grew up in technology, some kind of engineer, propeller heads know everything. It creates more of a top-down culture, which doesn't work anymore. How do we convert our leaders to be about questions, to be able to bring in the best from every employee that they have on their team and make them feel like and achieve their potential of what they can provide? So one of the leadership lessons I have really enjoyed doing is, first of all, be aware about your team, about the people you're interacting with, about yourself. It's okay to be vulnerable and say, I don't know, can you help me get there, right? And when we kind of set that standard where people feel that, okay, you're not the Miss Know-it-all, you're open for their ideas, then kind of bring them into the circle to be the problem solver, which creates kind of participation, belongingness. And then I think diversity goals let you hire the right people. Inclusion goals let you retain them in the company. It's always more expensive to lose a person than hire a person. So retention is extremely critical. Retention is something that gives us better results, and definitely focus on the top talent, as I said, which comes in with all the right ingredient around talent, about knowledge, about emotional quotient, which kind of helps them connect the dots and drive differences. From top-down perspective, some of our companies have been leading recently. Means we launched our I&D Council with the chair being our CEO, and kind of bringing in people from every level to be part of the council, so that we bring in the right change in the organization to be the right kind of social citizen going forward.
Great. Shamla?
So I want to call out two specific programs that were very targeted to underserved, underemployed communities. And if you just think about this, there are virtually no federal programs that allow people to get funding or loans to go get education unless it is directly related to a college attendance. And those people who are underserved, underemployed, they already don't have the money to build these skills. So I think, we did two things that I thought, stand out beyond all the other things that IBM does. But the first was IBM was a pioneer of a program called Pathways to Technology. And what it does is it takes students from some underprivileged schools, underprivileged communities, and puts grade 9 through 14 students through their normal high school curriculum, but they also add additional STEM programming. So when a student graduates high school, they also graduating with the equivalent of an associate's degree, and it is an associate's degree. So you graduate high school, you come out with an associate's degree, you really are trained, you can go out and work. And the program has cost nothing to the candidate. Now, IBM pioneered the program, but handed it off to schools right now. Right now, 220 schools run this program. And, my opinion is that there's probably capacity there for this to grow way beyond the 222. So that's the first program. The second one, which I think is really compelling, is there's an apprenticeship program that was created, and the apprenticeship program pretty much has no prerequisites, no testing, and no major requirements other than, the typical have a good attitude, be curious, be willing to learn, have passion for technology, things like that, including having a commitment to succeed. Everything else comes with the program. So there are apprenticeships that can last 6 months. There are apprenticeships that can last 12 months and some that go as long as 18 months. Through the apprenticeship, the apprentice will get paid, but there are a couple things they learn. The training is work-based, so you get to actually do work. It is comprehensive learning with hands-on training, but most importantly, it's attached with mentors and mentorship. So you don't just get to acquire new skills, you also get the kind of advice and guidance that you need to proceed through your career, not just for while you're in the program, but when you get out of the program. And of course, needless to say, we probably hire more than 90% of the students who actually go through the apprenticeship program. And that program has been running for about 4 years. Each year it increases. And right now, it will continue to increase exponentially. But I think that's important because, people will come into the program, they'll learn, they'll get skills, and then they might leave and go somewhere else. But so what? We will increase the capacity, the intellectual abilities and the skills and talent of the industry at large. So it doesn't matter who's doing the training and who's doing the investment, we will uplift the entire community.
Thanks, Shamla. And we're getting to the end of our time, and I really appreciate all of the panel, and I appreciate what IBM does as well. And I know HMG and other groups support things like Genesis Works in Europe, which are also focused in that area. But I think, what I've learned from this panel is, boy, if you're a senior leader, you need to think internally in your business. How do we drive things externally into the community, to pick up on what Shamla did, and then look in your own heart and what are the best practices that we can properly implement, as humans around. And we've heard it, demonstrating vulnerability, empathy, challenging our assumptions, adopting that learning orientation, making a space for diverse perspectives in our team, encouraging participation, be intentional about mentoring, and as Earl puts it, sponsoring people, and then setting yourself goals, personal goals about, recognizing people, listening to voices, standing up for what's right, you personally and within your team. And I want to thank again this entire panel. Thank you. I learned a lot, and really I hope that all the participants today learned a lot from you as well. Thanks. Back to you, Hunter.
Tony, brilliant job. Rashmi, Shamla, Earl, SHADAAB, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your insights and thought leadership. Guys, really stellar job. Another great summit. So it's a wrap for today, folks. A big thanks again to our speakers and panelists, to Commvault, Darktrace, and Nutanix for supporting the summit, for everyone's active engagement and keeping connected through our pivot, our digital pivot. Really exciting times for us all as tech leaders. my new book comes out in late August, and we have an author's note that's available now. Happy to forward the author's note now and a copy of the digital book to everyone who attended today's summit here at the end of August. So stay in touch and let's keep going. Be good. Thanks, guys.